everyone, I'm Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and thanks for joining us today for a special CEDIA Expo edition of NKBA Live on DesignTV. We're thrilled to be part of the CEDIA Expo virtual experience, a complete virtual and interactive event for the home tech industry. And of course, joining me today is my very good friend, Susie Williford, EVP and Chief Strategy Officer of the National Kitchen and Bath Association. We all know her as the queen of the NKBA, which is 50,000 members strong. A lot of friends, right, Susie? How are you?
A lot of friends.
Yeah.
Hi, Cindy. How are you? It's always so good to see you.
I know this is really becoming a weekly occurrence, which I'm kind of look forward to, I have to say. Okay. Involved with CEDIA Expo.
A few years ago, Cindy, the NKBA aligned ourselves with CEDIA Expo to promote the role of the connected home technology in the kitchen and bath space. Our Living Impacts Design Life Cycle, life stage research, identified connected living as one of the 4 key themes for members. Spaces where smart home technology functions like cooking and baking not been high. So this the kitchen and bath designers and remind rooms with the latest products and innovations and enhance their clients' lives. And we realized that our smart tech integrators didn't even know it was a goal of ours to bring these specialists together.
Right? So
yeah,
all of us like right now times, and with more people working from the home, it's true. Right? So I'm delighted to introduce on this time out in New York, and then we have John Spencer, Associate and Studio Director at our New York. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi. Good. Great to be
about this. Physics of all things. So tell us how you really got involved in integrated technology. This should be interesting.
You know, what prompted me to get into physics was I used to hang out at this high-end AV store, and there was this old fellow there named Gary. I was hearing sounds come from all over the totally blown away and enamored by what was vinyl was pressed, tube amplifiers were constructed. And so that kind of prompted me to study physics and acoustics to understand and learn how our brain and our ears register sound, to understand this crazy principle that I was listening to. I also like to race cars, so physics just kind of seemed like
you're just interesting all around, right?
Well, you like to have fun with all these things. There's a lot of toys to play with in the world, and you know you want to get the most out of them. So it's good to really truly understand what makes these things tick. And so that's really kind of where that started. I did physics as my undergraduate, and that's where I met my business partner Michael, and then I from there got my MBA in Colorado a few years later, and had in between that time kind of been the go-to person to help friends and you know, people that were building a home. Maybe they wanted music throughout their space, because I used to just hang out in these stores and I knew all the technology. So I had kind of built a little bit of a consultancy business around helping them with home theaters and music and TVs. And then ran that concept through the business plan program at CU, Colorado University. You know, turned it into my MBA project, and graduated my MBA with a platform of this company.
So tell us, John, how exactly does the relationship work between an architect and a company like One Button?
Sure. So the architect usually leads the whole team. We, you know, we interview different consultants to us. Sometimes they come with a preferred contractor or preferred AV consultant, but more often than not, they want us to assemble a team for them. So you'll get proposals from multiple consultants. At this level though, and the level of homes that we typically do, there's always going to be an AV component. And more often than not, there's a short list of people that we really consider, and One Button is obviously one of them, because we feel comfortable with presenting someone that we know has the same mindset that we have, and there's an expectation that can be met. We both appreciate similar things, and we're both really in tune to listening to the client and making sure that they're getting exactly what they want, as opposed to kind of pushing something on them. So it's more about listening than it is about marketing.
How does it actually work? When does the partnership come together?
Yeah, so we typically start, we'll have a schematic design. Once the client's on board, we have a schematic design, we have plans, then we assemble the whole team. Who's doing structural, mechanical, lighting, AV, and unlike in the past, I think years ago, people brought AV in on the tail end, and that was a big mistake. I mean, you want to bring them in right from the beginning because it's part of the infrastructure, and it will affect everything, and it's connected to everything now. Lighting, shades, the mechanical, all of it want to be integrated into the AV system. So it's really important right on the front end to know what the expectations of the client are, and then kind of tailor the team to that client and to the specific context of the site.
I mean, it's great advice. Get it up front, right?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine you've got a townhouse that's 70% renovated, and it's all framed, but no one's taken into account where all the risers go for all of your conduit or for all of your fiber optic.
Right.
And have you allocated space for the tech room or the IT room where you're going to have racks of all of this equipment? And now, granted, those equipment rooms are getting smaller and smaller every year, but you still have to take them into account. And it doesn't matter if someone's doing a 5,000 square foot house or a 25,000 square foot house. They want every square inch of real estate for closets and saunas, and they have to be forceful up front. Like, we're going to need this mechanical room, and we're going to need this IT space, and it's great to know where all of that infrastructure is going on the front end, so you're not redesigning and being inefficient in the design process as you go.
Are you asked a lot of times what smart home system to use?
Yeah, I think sometimes people lead the question with, should I use this control platform or this control platform? And to us, that's kind of like asking what type of cherry you should have on the top of your wedding cake. Like, it's the very last thing you should consider. Really, the fundamentals are really what's important in the system. Who are we going to use for your lighting control and your shades? How are we going to do the music throughout the space? What type of viewing environment are you going to have? What type of media do you like to watch? Are you watching old films? Are you watching new stuff? What kind of music do you listen to? So figuring all that stuff out, and then do we even need a control system? We've kind of delineated our offerings into analog and digital, and so we have some systems that are built around physical representations of the things that we control, and we can eschew that, and we'll focus on the finishes and the materials we use. A lot of clients, especially the Seldorf clients, are taking us down a path of almost like untechnology. When they walk into their house, and this is our favorite type of project. You don't see a single piece of technology. You see something like, this is the Meljack keypad. This, behind it, conceals a very sophisticated lighting system, which you don't see. There's no speakers. We use these invisible speakers that go into the drywall. And televisions can either be concealed, or we use the super flat ones that can be integrated into the walls. So our favorite projects are ones where you don't see what we have done until you want it there. Because people don't want a TV, they want a display. They don't want speakers, they want music.
I love that. Okay, so wait, I'll name a project or two, and then you guys can tell us what you did. Just give us like the Cliff Notes version. So how about the Chelsea townhouse?
Yeah, that's about 5,000 square feet, and it was a complete gut. And it's a modest townhouse by some standards. I'd be happy to live there myself.
Me too.
In the West 20s, but it's a kind of thing where we wanted the townhouse to be as light and open as possible because it's not very wide. So we kept it very white and very light and ethereal. And there's this kind of sculptural stair in the center of the plan. And that's really the focal point on every floor of the house.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
It's a very intimate, quiet space, and it feels very loft-like, even though most townhouses, when you go into them traditionally, are kind of cut up between the front and the back, and this feels like one big flowing space. So we wanted to maximize the kind of calmness and the quiet that goes with the architecture, and almost to make the architecture less of a focal point outside of the stair. The stair is really the kind of main event.
What did you do together, Matt?
Yeah, the technology was fairly straightforward in this project. We had a lighting control system, shades at most every window, and music throughout the space. Some were standard architectural speakers, and I believe we used some invisible speakers in the project. We have an invisible speaker that has recently been developed that we've been actively using in a lot of projects that is kind of no compromise. Before, these speakers that would go into the drywall and disappear, really neat product. They didn't sound great, but we figured out how to make them sound just as good as a regular speaker. So you don't have any compromise if you don't want to see that technology. So again, a very minimal footprint of technology, because ultimately when you come into the space, you want to be wowed by the cleanliness of the architecture. You want to be wowed by the staircase. You want to be impressed by the clean lines and the high quality and the high level finish of the drywall, and the sculptures and artworks that are in the space itself. So,
as you say, you don't want to see what you've done, actually. All right, so how about another one, the Sagaponic house?
It's this really incredible house, and the entire exterior is mahogany. And it's got this beautiful brise soleil on the back side of it. And the front side is very private to maintain a privacy from the street, and the back side is completely open to this beautiful, lush lawn.
And this was one of those fun moments where the entire 2-year span of the project, we had integrated roller shades as part of the plan. So we were doing roller shades along this, I don't know what's the length of the house, is effectively the entire length of the house, roller shades coming down. And at literally the 11th hour, there was a change to drapery on that. So we had to quickly pivot and ensure that we could get drapery tracks, and that the drapery tracks would be able to manage such a large span of windows and where they would sit on the mullions. But at the end of the day, I think it turned out beautifully, because you have these draperies that are just light and flowing that are breaking up this otherwise very, very long corridor. But yeah, the house is shaped kind of like an E almost, where there's a backbone along that back window and then rooms that go into it. Same thing, very, very lightweight technology footprint, simple lighting control system to give the clients, the all off and simple scene control at different locations, whole house music throughout, including in the patio and the pool area.
But I would say the majority of our clients tend to hire us because of the type of work we do, which is more quiet and elegant and timeless. And it's kind of that you walk in, you don't want that in your face.
Yeah, and in addition to not distracting from the important things that we think the house is about, which is the lighting and the artwork and the people in the space.
Yeah.
The thing to us, and the reason for us to move away from a lot of visible technology, is it immediately dates a space. So I don't know if you've ever walked into a home and you're like, wow, this is such a beautiful place. When was this done? It looks like it may be 100 years ago. And then you see like a yellowing alarm panel on your wall, and you're like, 1987. I know exactly what year that alarm panel came from. And so that's a piece of technology that's betrayed the design of this space. And everybody in the house worked so incredibly hard to make authentic, the metals, the hinges, the door frames, the curtains, everything to be authentic to this time period. When somebody comes along and slaps an alarm panel or slaps a control panel on the wall, and it ruins the illusion. And, again, that's what we're all about, being very sensitive to and really care about, and appreciate having Seldorf as a partner, where we both go through the agony of making sure that we don't, ruin that illusion.
We call that wall acne.
We call it visual noise.
It's just so beautiful when you avoid it,
Right.
Just
Exactly.
it not being there.
Exactly. So John, what about giving us a piece of advice that you would maybe give to another architecture firm or designer about looking for an integrator? Like what advice can you share with us?
Yeah, I mean, we've already mentioned bringing them on board quickly, like you bring them on in the beginning of the process. I'd say the other thing is to make sure that they've got a great resume. They've done a lot of work. They've got a lot of experience. If it's possible to actually visit spaces that they've worked on, so that you can get a sense of the sound and how the lighting works. Have them come in and do a demonstration. Like Matt's team is amazing with demonstrations. If you see this painting behind him, the whole purpose of that painting in the conference room is to check color correctness. And there are some clients who are very attuned to like, exactly.
Wow.
So some people like cool light, some people like warm light. And when you get clients to a certain level, they really want to control their environment, or they want to be able to change the environment. What happens, the lighting you have during the day versus the evening can be a completely different thing as well. So having a demonstration, being able to see their work, checking their resume, talking to other people who've worked with them. It's hard to recommend someone if you haven't worked with them before. But then once you build that relationship, it can really last for decades as long as it's a solid relationship. I think what do they want? What is the layout? But more important, and the design has to be beautiful, but more importantly, the function. How do they live on a daily basis? And make sure you tailor whoever you're hiring as a team to the way they live.
So Matt, then I ask you, like, what's the biggest objection then?
I think there's at times people are just have a phobia of technology, and they think, oh, that's just too much. They want the benefits of the technology, but they don't want to necessarily deal with the downsides, the cost, the maintenance. And so a large part of our job is to help get them over that hurdle. And to John's point, we have many years of experience understanding where the problematic areas are, and being able to work around them, because we want to ultimately make sure that the products don't have issues in the field. So those are important points for us to be able to reassure somebody that you can have the benefits of this technology, and you do want to have the benefits of lighting control and shades. Everybody, that's building a home should at least consider the benefit of mechanized shades, the benefit of, pressing one button for all of your lights to turn off, because I know everybody walks through their house that doesn't have this and they put the house to sleep. They turn off all the lights. So we really just have to help people get over that hurdle of understanding the trade-off, the benefits of these technologies is worth a little bit of a time investment upfront that we'll make together, but that it's also a fun process, and that we have a lot of fun together, and we get to make fun choices, and that it's going to be a great experience at the end of the day.
But you still have to educate your client, right?
It is a process, and I think it's really showing the client what their options are. The last thing you want to do is be pushy or feel like you're doing marketing. What you want to do is make the client feel comfortable and know that they have options, not only cost-wise, and that's the other thing that I think can scare people off from an AV system, is they think they have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And whether it's 1,000 square foot apartment or a 25,000 square foot townhouse, there are different ways to tailor that scope to that client and to that budget. So I think it's showing them options, giving them options, and also the most important thing is that the AV consultant really knows the most current technology, because it does change so quickly. Yeah. And if someone's showing you outdated information, it's by the time you're in construction, which can be 6 months to a year later after you get through design and construction documents, then you've got to replace everything that you already specified. So you have to have someone who's staying current with everything that's new.
Right, it's so true, but it's good to know, like, don't be afraid, because it could be at any size and any scale. What are you seeing the biggest demand for, and specifically how is technology being integrated in kitchen and bath spaces now?
Some clients want speakers in their bathroom. They want speakers in every room of the house. Other clients, it's a psychological leap. Some people don't like a TV or speakers in their bathroom. They feel like that's private time, right, and the door is closed, and there's like almost like an invasion of your self, right? So it's really a very client specific thing. But we've had, a lot of the televisions that are behind mirrors. Some clients want those because it's nice when you turn them off that you don't see the television, because nobody really wants to stare at a blank black screen, right? And then there's a lot of technology with toilets, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and you've probably done a whole episode on that in and of itself. Yeah. The 100 options on your toilet seat. So
should we bring that into our fold? We don't do smart toilets. Maybe we should start integrating toilets into our technology package. What I think is really interesting is kitchens and baths are the two most challenging rooms for us. And it's because in bathrooms, usually there's a lot of exotic materials, a lot of marbles, a lot of hard surfaces. Sometimes the ceilings are done. So it's like, oh, you want to do music? Where are we going to do that? You want to do television? Right. Again, it's usually going to go in the mirror, go behind the mirror. So we kind of have to pull out our most sophisticated tricks to do audio or video in these rooms, like invisible speakers. Kitchens, similar. You don't have the opportunity to put anything on a wall. So kitchens are where sometimes we'll use integrated cabinet lifts for televisions, because where else are you going to put it? You have cabinets all around you. And then the other thing we're seeing is, kitchens flowing out into living room and dining spaces. So it's kind of that interplay and that crossover between, your kitchen, your dining room, and your entertainment room, where your TV is. Those can all kind of start to flow together. So you have to be really cognizant of what's going on in that environment. How's it going to color what's going on in the kitchen environment? How do you maybe, separate those out? And sometimes you'll have temporary partitions. Maybe there's a reason to do some sort of a drapery wall between the two. So you just have to kind of take it all together and understand the flow and the usage between those rooms to apply the technology appropriately in a space like the kitchen.
You have to find ways to hide the TVs, and you have to have ways to either, like you mentioned, Matt, like have some sort of recessed panel that can levitate, and it's hiding it behind beautiful paneling, or it's within a cabinet, or it comes out of the ceiling, out of a coffer.
And a lot of times, our job is to convince people they don't need something somewhere. It's like, do you really need a TV in your kitchen? Do you really need a TV in your bedroom? Shouldn't you be sleeping? I joke that I want to charge double to install a TV in a bedroom, because I don't think it's good for you psychologically. So sometimes I'll try to just gently sway people into saying, okay, why don't we, consider putting more emphasis into the viewing experience over here, having one less television in your space. You don't need to have a TV in every room. Let's have a really good TV here. And that's where you go to watch it. And everywhere else, you don't have the visual noise of a television. You're using music in these places to entertain and occupy yourself. That's my personal theory. Sometimes we get clients to go along with that. Not always. Sometimes they look at me and they're like, "You're TV guys. Why don't you want to put a TV everywhere? Why can't I have a TV in my kitchen?" And I'm like, TV in your kitchen. There you go.
I love that, Matt. I love that. We just redid our kitchen, and I have a TV, a small TV that we put where the microwave used to be. And I was lucky enough, my cabinets are white, and I found a small TV that's got a white band around it. So when it's off, it just looks like a cabinet with glass with nothing in it. But in my living room, I have never, ever had a TV in my living room. Never.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's when people come over, I want them to talk. I don't want them to watch a football game.
Right. And the time I try to get to people, hey, let's not have a TV in this room. Do you want to just, make this about music, make it about conversation, make it about gathering? Sometimes they get the message, like I say, sometimes they don't.
No, I love that too. I love that too. Thanks for sharing. So what about budget? I mean, cost is a major factor. Let's say that I want to dip my toe in, but I don't have a budget for the whole house. What's the advice?
I think it's important to focus on high value areas. For me, not having mechanized drapery or shades in a master bedroom is kind of like not having internet in a home. It's like, let's at least, make sure you have a comfortable sleeping environment, because once you acclimate to sleeping in darkness and waking up to light, it's hard to go back. So I say, let's do the right things, but in fewer places. If we need to cut back on budget, let's remove areas, but not reduce quality. You would expect the quality of the finishes to match the overall quality of the space. So you wouldn't expect to go into a really beautiful home and see a bank of really terrible looking light switches.
It's an editing process as opposed to an additive or a cumulative process. Like, it's about prioritizing things. When we bring in a new client and it's a residential project. We actually have a survey that we go through with the client. And not to pressure them, we can give it to them or email it to them and have them fill it out, but then review it in person and talk about everything from air control to lighting control to the time of day they wake up. And do they want the sun in their bedroom in the morning, or do they want the sun in the breakfast room? So it's a matter of really knowing how your client lives. And then I keep using the word tailor, but it's really about making sure that you're meeting the client's expectations, because the happier they are, the more likely they are to come back and to enjoy the home. And I think that everything that Matt just said was 100% dead on about quality.
People have this conception that technology is short-lived, but the technology that we do and we apply together is not. It's very long-lived. You know, the in-ceiling speakers, architectural speakers, drapes, shades, lighting control, these all have 20, 30, 40-year lifespans. This is product that's going to be with you in your house for the life cycle of your house, and hopefully longer. And certain elements of that might change, but the core infrastructure is going to have a lot of longevity and go with you for many, many years. And we have projects out there that have been around for 12 years. People are still using all of that every single day. So you look at the net cost of application, it's actually incredibly, incredibly low, because you're amortizing this over the cost of your entire existence in your home.
That's great. Hey, Susie, you mentioned that connected living was a key theme from the NKBA's Living Impact Design research. Can you tell us about the top tech solutions identified in that research?
Certainly I can. 57% of the respondents on the survey stated that the access to the internet and social media were important for cooking inspiration, for recipes, and for instruction on cooking. And funny, I mean, I do that too. And 41% of them also desired connectivity in the bathrooms to facilitate multitasking and productivity. For the kitchen, top tech solutions are flexible lighting, entertainment that is clearly visible from the kitchen. Funny, these are things that we've already heard about.
Right.
Integrated music and video, and integrated web interface with the appliances, which we haven't heard much about, but there's so many sophisticated appliances now. So many of them have Wi-Fi enabled, but people aren't Wi-Fi enabling or integrating them. And then for the bathroom, flexible lighting solutions, multifunction mirrors, which are awesome, voice activated and online access to email, internet, movies, and audiobooks are the top request. And I was so it did my heart good to say that the bath and the kitchen are a little bit harder, because that was part of our purpose here. It is hard to integrate it there. And so that was our goal, to bring people together, because people talk about it, they want it, they're just not exactly sure what it is. And so having professionals like John and Matt hook up or get to know our design people that do kitchen and bath, certified designers, kitchen and bath designers, and interior designers, that can open the dialogue to having people explain what they need and what they want. So it's a long-term satisfied customer.
For us, circadian lighting is a really fascinating technology that we're implementing in a lot of our jobs, and the benefits of it in a bathroom space where you might not have a lot of natural lighting, and in a kitchen where you spend a lot of time through those transitionary periods, we think is hugely important, because you're able to match that outside light and bring it in. Or in the bathroom, you know, with the touch of a button, I can see what I'm going to look like in the evening. So I just warm the lights up to see what I look like at dinner. If I'm getting ready in whiter light, this isn't how I'm going to look when I'm at dinner. It's going to get warmer. So you're able to really transition the lighting to suit what is happening, and then also just match that exterior light. So it's always matching, the lights are always matching the exterior lights, or matching the architectural lights. So being able to talk to people about these new technologies and why they might want to consider them is a big part of that conversation.
And John, like you said, it's a relationship, right? So your relationship has grown, and it continues to as technology advances, right?
Correct. And some of these things that Matt's mentioning, like Ketra lighting or the Celaya lights, where you can emulate daylight and change the time of day. can make a huge difference if you have a part of your house that's, just inherently dark.
Right.
And it really changes your perception, it changes your mood. And I think something we haven't touched on that we're all here virtually is during the whole COVID situation, where we're spending so much time at home. And so to make sure that your kitchen is comfortable and that your home is comfortable and that you have access to Wi-Fi is critical. So it's even more important than it ever has been. And I think it will be going forward as well.
I like to joke that we're here to give you all the things that you lost from COVID. You can't go to a concert. We have really good music. You can't go to Broadway shows. We have home theater. You're not getting enough daylight outside. We have circadian lights. You can't go to the office. Well, we got your Wi-Fi covered. So, but as John said, we're pushing our homes in ways we've never pushed them before. We're using them to entertain our kids, to use it as a schoolroom, to entertain, friends that we selectively bring over. So we're using our homes in ways we've never expected that we would be using them during this time. And so the technology in the space is that much more important. And we're already seeing that people are coming to us with being very much more comfortable to invest even more in their home than they were before.
For sure. Susie, it's clear to me we need to have a part 2 on this.
I'm overwhelmed.
I know. And it's unbelievable and it's so interesting. First of all, I want to thank Matt and John. Thank you so much. There's so much insight. And again, we're learning so much just in this one program. Thank you. Susie, always a pleasure. And thanks for digging in deep into this exciting world of home tech integration. Oh my God, we have so much to learn. And we'll see you all soon. We are going to have a part 2. Stay safe.
Thanks guys.
Everybody. Be safe.
Thanks so much. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Think Tank Thursdays. My name is Tina Brennan. I'm the VP of Marketing at Metropolis, and we'd like to thank you so much for joining us. As many of you are probably aware, this is our 6th year for the Think Tank series. It's a thought leadership enlightening program that visits top firms in key markets in North America. Last month, we launched the virtual version of this program where we were hosted by San Francisco-based firms. This month, we're being hosted by firms from Chicago. Today, we're pleased to be hosted by Huntsman Architectural Group, who have come up with a very relevant topic, the evolving role of shared spaces and how they can remain meaningful and healthy places to gather. Next week, we'll be hosted by AECom from Chicago, and then we're off to Miami for October. Upcoming Think Tank Thursdays programming can be found on the registration page and will be continually updated. The registration URL will be put into the chat box for you. The discussions from today's panel will be videotaped and available for viewing on demand next week on the Metropolis website. Today's panel is CEU accredited both through AIA and IDCEC. If you do not request accreditation when you registered, please send an email to ceu@metropolismag.com. Hosting an event like this requires the support of great firms like Huntsman Architectural Group, as well as our amazing sponsors. We'd like to thank Growy, designing and engineering innovative water products for bathroom solutions and kitchen fittings. Hunter Douglas ceiling and wall products, solutions in every material for every space and every budget that pushes the boundaries of ceiling design. KI, a trusted resource for innovative furniture and movable wall systems solutions for educational, business, and government markets. Material Bank, the largest material marketplace for sampling in the architecture and interior design industry. And Versteel, a solution provider of American-made furnishings for working and learning environments. Today's panel discussion will run approximately an hour and a half, or until 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 Central Time. And now I would like to introduce today's moderator, our editor-in-chief at Metropolis, Avi Rajagopal. Avi, take it away.
Thanks so much, Tina. And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. It's so wonderful to have all of you joining in from all over the country. And for folks who are tuning in from overseas, talk about evolving communal spaces, the future of shared amenity areas. One of the, I think, most hopeful trends in the design of commercial buildings and commercial spaces in recent years focus on amenity spaces and shared areas. Very often, these are not just identity, they're also a place that show that a building every day, and also form an important bond. These shared spaces the productivity of the people who work in buildings, the relevance of buildings to their neighborhoods, tenants who are interested in leasing space in buildings. COVID-19, of course, has put some undue pressures on all of that and is promising to change the landscape of commercial space across the board. We're here today based in Chicago and the area. Features tenants will look forward to going forward, how science, data, and technology will influence the design for public spaces, and how developers and owners might react to this changing market as well. So we're going to approach today's topic from many different points of view. And to help us do that, we have a fantastic group of panelists here today. We have with us Steve Seiss, who is a Senior Vice President of Portfolio Management at Golub & Company. Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for joining us today. We also have Gideon D'Arcangelo, who is the Associate Principal and Experience Designer at Arup. Gideon, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Also with us today is Andrew Volkens, who is Associate Principal of Huntsman Architectural Group, our host firm for today's discussion. Andrew, thank you so much for helping put this panel together and for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And we also have with us Carrie Vagadis, Senior Associate of Huntsman Architectural Group. Carrie, thanks so much for joining the discussion today.
Thanks.
So we're going to start off, I think, with Andrew here. Andrew, as I was saying, in the last couple of years, we really saw a new appreciation of shared spaces in buildings. I think what were previously considered sort of pass-through areas are now considered essential components of the building. And we were seeing a fair amount of work pre-COVID that was sort of rationalizing, looking at research to understand what effect those spaces have on the success of buildings. And so we saw great focus on those areas. Tell us a little bit about Huntsman's approach to common areas, and maybe also a little bit about what aspects of that approach you see as still being relevant this year, despite all the challenges we're facing at the moment.
Sure, yeah. As you know, and as you just said, shared common spaces and amenities in commercial buildings have really come a long way, right? They're literally the face and the identity of a building. They help define the culture and the community of that building. And every building has a different culture, a different community, different business drivers and goals, right? So first and foremost, it's up to us as designers and architects to work with our building owner clients to determine what's the story that building's trying to tell, right? And this is related to branding and leasing and marketing strategies, obviously. And once we figure out that story that the building's trying to tell, we have to translate that into design and ask ourselves, how does this space make us want to feel? And for us at Huntsman, that's really what design is all about. Everyone has a guttural and an instinctive reaction when they enter a building, right, or a space. How does it make you feel? That's what we do as designers and architects. The look, the feel, the materiality, the light, smell, sound, it all plays a role to our reaction in space, right? And this starts in commercial buildings, especially with the lobby experience. In the past, commercial lobbies, like you mentioned, were often seen as bunkers or pass-through spaces. I'm thinking of the old, marble-clad, cold lobby with a big security desk, cameras in every corner. You've got 5 security guards looking at you, wondering what you're doing. And, if you're not familiar with the building's protocol, and we've all been there before, you feel awkward or, intimidated at times, uncomfortable. And that's not what building landlords in the past decade have wanted out of their buildings and their lobbies. And so if you fast forward to today, well, let's fast forward to pre-COVID maybe. And our clients were going against this this hard feel, this fortress lobby. And they started to take cues from hospitality, right? They wanted the lobby to be warm and inviting, Seen a lot more use of natural materials, maximizing daylight, introducing soft seating where you can sit or work or wait in comfort, right? I think it's more like, they wanted to create a feel that you're entering someone's living room and not this walled up fortress, right? It's where you want to be. And this lobby experience that we set up, it really has to carry through to the other shared spaces in the building, the other amenities, whether it's the tenant lounge, the fitness room, the yoga room, the gym, the conference center, whatever it may be. They all need to tell the same story. We work, hands-on with the marketing and leasing teams, and they always tell us that the experience from street to suite needs to be consistent, and it's the same story throughout. So fast forward now to today with COVID, and the effort it takes to get to your office to enter your building is compounded tenfold, right? People that are making this effort want to feel welcome and invited more now than ever, right? Their building can't just be their workplace, but it also needs to be a sanctuary for them, a destination. So they're still going to want this type of feel, this welcoming and inviting environment, but they're also going to know the security on top of that they're entering a healthy space, right? And so how we do that, I think is going to be a big part of our discussion today, and I'm interested to talk about it.
Yeah. I think, thank you so much for laying all of that out for us. It's like, we've always wanted spaces to be welcoming of everyone. And I think even before COVID-19, the point was, how can a building be welcome to anyone who might be walking off the street, and not put up barriers, while setting up, sort of more permeable, maybe boundaries, right? In terms of, what areas might be used by what people. But I think now it's almost like we don't want spaces to be too welcoming at this point, right? If we were to be returning to offices today. So it's such a fine balance. And I agree with you. I'm looking forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say. Just a quick reminder to everyone in the audience, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send us questions at any point during today's discussions. If you go in there, you see a question that's been asked and you want to see it answered, hit the thumbs up icon below it. We'll take the questions with the most upvotes first. I'd like to come to Steve next. Steve, at CallUp, of course, you manage a large portfolio of properties. You also, manage the 300, which was, a project that you worked on with Huntsman Architectural Group and Arab here. What concerns are you hearing from tenants as they're considering the return to work, or as they're gradually letting their workforce come back? And how is that influencing your strategy or informing it at this point, given that there's a lot that we still don't know in terms of common areas in buildings? So whether it's security or health and safety, understanding the flow of people through spaces. What are the concerns you're hearing, and how is that informing your decisions?
Yeah, thank you, Avi. Hello, everybody. So the concerns are certainly evolving over this, past few months here, and we've gone from the beginning, first days here, and just nobody really knowing what to do, quite frankly, and tenants asking us, property management, our on-site managers, myself included, just, what are we doing? What's the plan? Are you open? Are you going to be open? Are you closing the building? And, that was it really, on top of everything else we had to figure out. It was interesting for all parties because it became a team effort pretty quickly. And in good ways, your property manager became a confidant and a counselor and was really there to help through this pandemic versus, landlord, I pay them rent, they clean my space, they hopefully build me really great amenity spaces as we have done. And as this evolved, it's really becoming kind of nobody wants to be the first, I think is safe to say, to come back. And they want to understand in detail, in depth, what is our plan? What are we doing to make the building safe, to give them comfort and confidence to return, because they're worried about their employees and their business and how can they make this happen? And asking us too, like, what can we do in our space to help here? How do we, spread out seating? How often are you cleaning? What are you using to clean? So it's really been a comprehensive review of all the things that we really used to take for granted that just happened. We had security, we cleaned your spaces, we took out the trash. There was a lot of people working really hard behind the scenes to do all these things. But I think from the tenant standpoint, it was an expectation. So we've had to work with them. And I mean, we've developed fancy brochures about all the cleaning protocols in our building and all the things we're doing to keep people safe. Something I never thought, we're used to making fancy brochures to market our space and send to leasing agents and promote our fantastic amenities. But this was really a new challenge for us. So, we had to take a deep dive from starting with cleaning protocols. How often? What are we using? Can we do it more? How do we layer in, hourly cleanings of lobbies and bathrooms and buttons? And what do you touch? Just thinking through as you walk through a building, our managers walk through the building, and we did this in our headquarters building. I did with the manager and said, all right, let's get out on the street and come in. What's being touched? Where do you go? Where do you go from here? And just, so it was amazing how kind of in depth we got on that experience. So in terms, the expectations are they just want to know we have a plan. That's first and foremost, right? I think my guess is they're reporting up to their corporate office and being able to say, hey, we can go back because here's the plan that our building's doing. And we cover cleaning protocols, we cover security, we cover social distancing, mask requirements, questions. Are you taking temperatures? Which we're not. That's up to a tenant, but if you want to, great. And here's maybe a few groups we know that you can contact. So it's really helping them just feel comfortable sending their employees back to the building. And then in terms of, how's this informing our strategy? The question we keep asking here at Golub is, how different is the next building we build versus what we last built? And we don't have that answer yet. Hopefully we will soon, but it's going to be an evolving process. But what we're doing is engaging with designers and architects and engineers and attorneys and our insurance providers to really think through this, because this isn't, I know today we're here mostly to talk about the physical space, but there's a lot of other considerations from a legal standpoint, insurance standpoint. What are the new clauses that are going to be in lease terms? Can we get pandemic insurance going forward? So it's amazing how this issue has just touched so many facets of our business. But I think it's a constant exploration of new ideas and technologies, and surprising to learn some of these technologies have been around for a while with UV lights, bipolar ionization. Who knew what bipolar ionization was, 6 months ago? Full disclosure, I did not. I thought it was something from Star Wars or Star Trek, but I'm learning a lot more about it these days. So I think that's that's informing our strategy. It's communication, and I think the industry as a whole has been fantastic with sharing information, people willing to talk. Seminars, conferences like this have just been so informative and so helpful.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you also for kind of emphasizing the role of communication. I mean, just hearing you talk, the different levels of communication that you're undertaking right now is absolutely fantastic. And, you know, also it's interesting that the point that you brought up, that now tenants or people in the building are, you know, are really digging into some of the processes that have always taken place in buildings, you know, whether it's air filtration or cleaning protocols or security. But all of a sudden now, you know, I think people, you know, you're right. I mean, tenants are not only reporting, whoever your interface is at the tenants is not only reporting higher up to their management, they're also reporting to their employees, because I think people in general, even anybody walking off the street is demanding a higher level of accountability in terms of knowing that the space they're entering is safe for them to enter. So it really creates a complex scenario, and there's a lot of communication that has to happen. Thank you also for bringing up technology, because that gives us a direct link to what I'd asked Gideon about. You know, Gideon, obviously, you know, hearing what Andrew and Steve has said, you know, there's going to be so much attention on building systems, how they work, and what they're able to do for the people in the buildings, but also to some extent what people's perception of those systems is, right? There's just so much communication, as Steve said, that has to happen in a way between the building and the people who are using it. How can technology help us with that? You know, first of all, can technology help us with us? How can technology help us with that? And also, what information should we be gathering and communicating in this process? So tell us a little bit about Arup's research into that too.
Sure. Thanks, Avi. I mean, this is really about restoring trust and restoring confidence in the return to shared spaces. And both, of course, technology and good communication design are hugely important in that whole story. You know, we like to think that buildings are life-sustaining vessels, right? So they're not living creatures, of course, but they're more lifelike every year we go. And their job is to help sustain life of the people within the building and make, you know, that's why all of this focus on health and wellness has happened, not just with COVID, but pre-COVID with Well Standard and Fitwell and Reset. There's a greater consciousness out there of the health and wellness of the environment. Prior to that, there was a great consciousness of the health of the building in relationship to its environment with LEED status. And I think we're seeing the kind of rise of this awareness. We're going to see more of a rise of awareness of indoor environmental quality. And so I always ask the question, you know, how do we give the building a voice? What does the building have to say to me or to anyone as they're going in? What does the building know? And then how can it talk about it? And that's where, you know, for example, our smart buildings team at Arup, we have a great team in Chicago actually that I work with all the time, can really work at how the things you can know about a building. And there's so much data being collected in modern buildings now. And there's often the question of like, well, what do we do? There's too much data. It's always a case, you know, there's data lakes and things that are often precede the real insights. And that's sort of where we are now. But I always ask the question then, well, what of that data do we want to surface to the occupants that would be of interest to them? What would be useful? Certainly certain things about energy performance of the building are interesting, but no doubt now, you know, what's the health status of this building? So we're starting to think about environments that signal their health status, the health-aware environments, and bring in a new kind of transparency and, if you will, generosity of sharing of data to that to meet the public demand, which we anticipate about wanting to know. And so, I mean, I love what you said earlier, Andrew, about this being the living room. You know, I think that's really what we see. The movement towards an informality and a greater sharing of experience in common areas, and we don't want to lose that at all in this next chapter. But how do we make these common areas feel good? A lot of it is based on perception. A lot of it's based on the reality of the space. And so kind of the way we go about, you know, our team goes about thinking of that as a kind of user experience approach to this, of thinking of the pathway of people entering the building. Like you said, Steve, like you actually went outside the building and re-entered it. That's what we always do in design, to see that whole path from you're in your Lyft or Uber, you're on your way, you're arriving at the building, you're crossing the threshold, you're in the lobby, you're going up to the elevator, and start to think about what would we want to know along that pathway, and then start to think about the kind of data that we can collect. I mean, there's great Internet of Things systems now that work wirelessly that are relatively quick to install on a retrofit. Or there's great data coming off your building management system or your building automation system that you can pull out. So you can go from kind of enterprise-wide to a kind of quick, rapid deployment to get this data. The kind of data we're seeing our clients interested in knowing is indoor environmental quality, or IEQ, which is made up of a number of things. Most importantly, indoor air quality, carbon dioxide levels, particulate matter levels, volatile organic compounds or VOCs, kind of rolled up into an indoor air quality data set. Occupancy density, that's a new one. You didn't really care so much about the density of the lobby or when you got out of your 4th floor elevator, like where the crowds were, but now you do care. And so we can sense that and communicate that information. Cleaning status is another one, where we know, hey, this was last done, this was last sanitized, and then it's going to be sanitized next. Stuff that you kind of just took for granted before. And then once you've got that data, then the challenge really is in design and communication, because you don't just, blurt all that data out to the public. It needs to be digested. It needs to be carefully designed so that it's works for a lay audience. It doesn't create alarm. It creates a sense of confidence. And that's where the real new design work is with that data.
Right. First of all, I will say, I think that just sounds so exciting that there's almost a shared area of technology that we have to create, right? A place that we can all inhabit in the technology world for us to understand the building, just as we inhabit a shared physical space in the building. That's just absolutely fantastic. Before we go any further, we've had a couple of questions about recordings of this panel. Yes, we are recording this event, and it will be available to view on broadcast next Tuesday on DesignTV by SANDOW at 1 p.m. Eastern time. That means that it will be playing on our homepage, as well as on the homepage of Interior Design Magazine, as well as the Facebook pages of both publications. And then next week, later next week, this discussion will also be available for on-demand viewing on our website, metropolismag.com/thinktank. So don't worry, if you need to hop off at some point today, you should be able to catch some of it. But I do hope you'll stay with us, because being here live means you can ask questions of our panelists, which of course you can't do on-demand viewing. And we already have 3 questions in, which is great. I want to remind everyone, please use the Q&A button and get your questions in. We'll start taking those in just a few minutes. Gideon, thank you for also taking us back to Andrew's comments about how a space feels. I think that's really the basic here. In that feeling is tied in everything that Steve was talking about, that sense of trust that the building is doing everything it should be doing to keep you safe. But layered into it is sort of the informality that you were talking about. And I think what's really interesting is that we want spaces to feel informal, to feel welcoming, to feel like we can use them as we would like, while at the same time having those structures in place behind the scenes or underpinning that informality, so that we can collect the data we need, transmit it, communicate it in interesting ways, and kind of give people the sense of, if they want to know what's going on, they can. I think it's such an interesting design challenge, this, of the common area, not just a physical area, but a common information area between the building and its occupants. And how do we shape that as designers? That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you also for the emphasis on indoor environmental quality. I think what Gideon was also referring to is that both IWBI, which administers the WELL standard, as well as USGBC, which administers the LEED standard, have introduced new, more stringent metrics for indoor environmental quality. They've further defined those metrics within their certification standards, and those updates should be coming in the newer versions of the standards. Most organizations who administer certifications and standards have undertaken a lot of work post-COVID to understand, how their certifications can also address the demands of COVID era sanitization. So thank you so much, Gideon, for talking about that. Terry, I'd like to come back to this idea of the design of that common space. Andrew, Steve, and Gideon have laid out quite a complex design challenge for us. And I want to ask you, do you see that as an opportunity? or what opportunities do you see in that? Do you think there's an opportunity for us to actually improve the way we approach shared spaces and the quality of the experience that Andrew started us off talking about?
Yeah, this is a funny question for me, because if any of my coworkers could chime in right now, they know that they are so tired of hearing me say, there's an opportunity here, there's an opportunity here, there's an opportunity here. You know, when everything first started, I think we were all sort of just stuck. You know, it was sort of like deer in the headlights. And, you know, as I was, you know, following different companies and what they were doing and restaurants and how everybody was having to adapt, there was this real exciting pivot that was happening. You know, I was reading something about the printing services that are in coffee shops, and, you know, no one's going to a coffee shop right now. So how does this printing service stay alive? Well, they were offering delivery for their print services. If you didn't have a printer at home, you could print remotely, they would deliver it to you, done. And I was like, you know, that's exciting. That's the kind of stuff that I really get jazzed about. And I think as designers, architects, engineers, building owners, we have this creativity in us. And, you know, my time at the University of Cincinnati was 5 years of problem solving. You know, we were given challenges and we had to step outside the status quo. We had to do something different to stand out. And, you know, that's what we take with us as designers. So I think what I'm excited about is this pivot and what we can do as building architects and interior designers that are going to make our spaces better, because they always can be better. Even without COVID involved, there's always a way to keep moving things forward. And I think, you know, now, like everybody was sort of touching on, it's the perception and how you feel. And that's super important right now. And I was just thinking of my own experiences of, you know, I haven't been on the train, and this week I got on the train, and, you know, it wasn't that bad. Everybody was wearing masks and everybody was super respectable to each other. And so it's like these little thresholds that you keep kind of hitting that you're like, okay, this is okay. And, you know, a coworker and I went to a design presentation in person, and we did that, and we're like, okay, this is good. And then, you know, I took an Uber the other day. And so it's like these little baby steps that I'm realizing that life is still going on out there. And I'm really excited to see sort of what happens in all these different industries as we pivot together and creatively problem solve, because, you know, that's what we get excited to do as, you know, like I said, as architects and designers. And so I think, you know, working in a team environment with Steve, with Gideon, and getting all these ideas sort of together and how we can help each other, I think is going to be huge. I don't think we can do this in a silo. I don't think we can do this in our own our box. I really think that collaboration and incorporating, you know, all these different ideas that are going on right now, and like you mentioned earlier, the welcoming of the space, I think it's going to be really important, because we really want to welcome everybody, especially with the conversations that are happening out in the world. I think it's going to be really important to make sure everybody feels very welcome and safe and included. And it's going to be intentional. I think the reason that everybody is going to be coming into the office is for a very intentional reason. And I have this thought that it's almost going to flip the script, where our office is going to become the sanctuary. We've talked a lot about that in our office, where home almost now has more distraction, and the office is where it's going to be a little bit more quiet and thought-provoking and inspiring. I know that's the case for me personally. That's why I'm in the office right now. So I don't have the cat jumping on me, the 2 kids running around, my husband's working from home. So the office has been sort of my good getaway. And so I think people are realizing that. I miss my team too, and I miss the interactions that we have every day. I miss the communication. And so I think, you know, slowly we'll get back to the office. And I think that people want to get back to the office. And I'm hopeful that, you know, we continue, because we are social people. You guys have heard me say it before. I think if we weren't social beings, the COVID would be over, because we would have all stayed home. There would have been no people at the bars. There would have been nobody at the beaches. Like, we would have been okay with that. But that's not what's happening. We are social. We need to gather. We need to share ideas. And so I'm really excited to look forward and sort of, I'm ready to jump. I'm ready to take that next step and let's do this and just see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I think on that last point, thank you so much for saying that. Much as we've been talking about how work can happen at home, I think we've forgotten a little bit about how much life happens at the office. And many of us have lives, at work. Especially those of us who work in an office or gather together with other people to do our work. It's a part of our lives, and not having that is definitely a big loss. And I think, it bodes well, as you said, for the return to the office. I also want to thank you for bringing up the fact that many people are involved. And I think Steve reminded us, right? Each person on a design team, so whether it's the architect, the interior designer, the contractor, consultants, technologists, but also building owners, property managers, facilities managers, each of them in turn intersects with a lot of other people. Steve spoke about working with attorneys, and he reminded us of all those other layers that designers may not see firsthand. And so each person is bringing a network of knowledge to that equation. And thank you for your message of hope and encouragement around that, because I think with all those people come together, as Steve said, as Andrew said, as Gideon said as well, we can rise to this challenge. I'd like to start taking up some of our audience questions now, but before we do that, thank you so much to everyone who's on this panel. We're here talking about evolving communal spaces with Andrew Volkins and Carrie Vagades from Huntsman Architectural Group, Gideon D'Arcangelo from Arup, and Steve Seiss from Golub & Company. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have quite a few questions from the audience. Thanks also to our sponsors, Hunter Douglas Ceiling and Wall Products, Growy, KI, Material Bank, and Versteel for making today's discussion possible. Eric Purrier asks, the team workplace often brings to mind an enclosed office space within a building, but how can we use the outdoors to create opportunities for group collaboration? It's also echoed in William Cruzel's comment. I would welcome the panel's thoughts on changes, if any, in shared outdoor spaces. So of course, when we're talking about communal spaces, outdoor spaces have been another huge trend in commercial properties. With people, with developers and managers really thinking of the footprint of their projects. There's also lots of studies about outdoor space and productivity. So that was a huge rising trend. I'd love to hear comments on how you're thinking about outdoor spaces in the new normal as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can start with this one. We recently finished a project with Steve at Golub at the 300 in Chicago, and in addition to repositioning the lobby, we added a ground floor tenant lounge, which not only served the tenants of the building, but it also brought in the public. We put in a coffee shop. We brought public into the building. It was a shared space for not only the building community, but the community at large. And one of the drivers for this space was creating a connection to the exterior. So we took out the glass storefront and put in a 30-foot sliding nano wall that connected to an exterior deck that had access to views and seating of the river. And that was one of the big drivers that Golub had. They knew that would make an impact for their tenants. We're working on another building amenity space for a different owner, and they decided to put it on the ground floor and create an outdoor deck with the pergola. It's becoming more and more common that we're seeing building owners and developers understand the value of outdoor spaces in their designs.
Yeah,
Steve,
we saw that, and that was evolving before this, and it's just going to be even bigger. And I can tell you, on our office buildings, there's still not a ton of people back. We're probably 10-15% populated in our office buildings. Our residential buildings, our high-rise apartment buildings, have been fully occupied this whole time. Everyone's in there. Everybody's working from home. And guess what? Your small studio apartment feels about 50% smaller than it did 7 months ago. So we've seen a huge demand. I mean, balconies. Balconies hadn't been a request or a top priority from prospects in years. And the last round of buildings we built in 2016, we did no balconies or very limited balconies because it just wasn't that big of a deal. And now the first request from almost everybody is balcony, balcony, balcony. And right behind that's outdoor space. So it's important. It gives you that outside. It's the fresh air. Again, it gives you that kind of comfort and confidence that, hey, I can feel okay being outside and being with 2, 3, 4, 5 other people. And I just don't feel enclosed. You spend so much time enclosed. The challenge will be, how do we get outdoor space in Chicago in, December, January, February? It's going to be that's a good challenge for all the designers and architects out there. But it was coming. It's here to stay. It's even more important now.
We were talking about it, and Chicago does such a great job with outdoor space. Every restaurant in the summer all of a sudden opens up. Every wall opens, and you think to yourself, wow, it's Chicago and we can really only do this 3 to 4 months out of the year, but we embrace it. And I think our buildings downtown have really embraced it too. Maybe a little bit more so than New York or other places, even just because our real estate's, I think, a little bit less expensive. And so we can kind of take these liberties to do a little bit more fun communal spaces for the tenants in the building. So I think it'll be interesting to see what some of the other cities start doing with more of the amenity outdoor space, because Chicago's kind of nailed it. I think in the last couple of years, every building sort of tries to get something in there for their tenants to have some outdoor space. And I think it's really important, and it's a great asset for sure.
Right. Gideon, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about sort of layering research and technology into outdoor spaces going forward. Is that something you're considering as part of your work?
Well, I do love the idea of creating more of a permeable boundary between outdoors and indoors, and have that. I think socially that is such an important. That's why I love the 300 project, because of that. I think that that's something that's been an area of interest, to create public spaces to take these formerly private places and have a public aspect to them. From a technology aspect, I would say less so, because really we're focusing so much on tracking that interior environment. That's really that's what we control, and really what we're trying to do is get people outside where there's a greater freedom with that. So really our focus has been on indoors.
Right. I think outdoor spaces also, they're an amenity, not just in terms of, actually people using them, but also in terms of indoor air quality, right? Cycling air in and out, those permeable barriers can be, great assets in terms of, having more air changes in a building and things like that. So as our metrics and our understanding of that evolves, I think over time, and Steve, yes, even in Chicago, I guess, hopefully we'll start to see, more sophistication in terms of how we understand that indoor-outdoor dynamic. Mauricio Sobrino asks, and I think they're referring to one of our previous discussions we've had about workplace culture post-COVID-19, post-pandemic. And I think, Steve, your comments about communication, Carrie, your comments about teamwork, Andrew, your comments about sort of experience. All of these changes that we're making in outdoor spaces are also going to need changes in corporate culture. Getting people used to the idea of, you need to program shared space. That was another big journey we had, working with organizations to help them understand the value of shared spaces and how to successfully use them to drive business goals. So in this new sort of scenario, is there a re-education we're going to need of corporate leaders and so on about common areas? How are you talking to your clients about that?
I think for us, there's no one size fits all, right? Every client has different business drivers and goals and culture that you have to really take into account before you assess how they return and how they use their space. And so I think first understanding that's first and foremost, understanding who they are, where they want to be, where they want to go. A tech firm's different than a law firm, than a PR firm. And so I wish there was like an answer I could just throw out there that said, this is what you have to do. But I think it's really about understanding the culture of who you're dealing with.
And we've had some of our past clients, come back to us and ask for help. How do we get our employees back in the office? You know, what does that look like? What does the signage look like? How do we sort of rearrange the desks? You know, we've done all sorts of studies for, you know, we've done one for a law firm, showing sort of like that 6-foot diameter circle around the desk, you know, where everybody can sit and how we can space people out. You know, we've looked at everything from what you touch, like, you know, Steve said, how you go through the building and how we can help eliminate some of those high touch areas by switching things out. So we've done studies with our clients. But like Andrew said, unfortunately, there's not just that golden ticket that we can hand them. You know, we really have to sort of work together. And I think that's sort of the underlying part to all this is it's going to be a lot of communication and a lot of trust and, you know, back and forth.
Right. I mean, that also has a bearing on shared spaces and amenity spaces, of course. You know, so for instance, if we were to convince people to give up their protocol of a 9-to-5 workday and open up flexibility for their employees, that significantly would reduce pressures on elevator bays, for instance. So, you know, I'm just also thinking about how what tenants do internally within their companies can make, for instance, Steve's job hopefully a little easier.
Yeah, we've looked a lot at that. You know, it's interesting. We have a pedestrian modeling tool that we use a lot to help analyze safe ways to load and unload the building, and we've been using that a lot. And we thought initially that, you know, the biggest challenges were in the morning at 9 o'clock and in the evening at 5. But in fact, you know, and this perhaps is obvious, but it's really, you know, that middle part of the day when people are heading out to lunch at various different times, you have a lot of inflow and outflow that you get the real pinch points. And so, you know, the degree that you can, you know, so we look at a lot at staggered starts of the day. You know, if not, you end up with scenarios where you can take many hours to load the building, and it can just become a completely untenable scenario of how you work within the building. So you know, in a multi-tenant building, that can be challenging to coordinate, but that's really part of the challenge, is this kind of orchestration of you know, perhaps getting certain companies to start later and end later, or work with the various different cultures of the organizations to try to get that whole building ecosystem working together.
Well, and I think that's where our amenity spaces can actually help too, right? So to lessen the density in an existing tenant space, you know, that's why, you know, we were building conference rooms and lounges and, you know, outdoor plazas for people to work on, and we were all starting to evolve into the third workspace comfort.
Yeah.
And I think the traditional model, first off, I'd like everyone to keep having office space. But I think the traditional model will change a little bit, and maybe I don't need to sit at this assigned desk from 9 to 5. I just have to be within the perimeter. And throughout the day, as you're flowing in and out throughout the day too, right? Yes, I got to come up at my desk and meet with this person or make this phone call, but you know, I'm going to go work on this spreadsheet, you know, down in the lounge and get away and get out of the, you know, the density of the office. So, you know, I think in a way, a lot of these spaces will help with providing options and flexibility to work close and still have that connection, because I think we do still want that connection to some degree and provide the optionality.
Yeah, and Steve, I think we were heading there anyways, that third workspace. It definitely, you know, every time I walked into the 300, it was awesome because there would be people using the lounge all the time. I saw people doing, you know, job interviews of people. I saw them doing informal meetings. I saw them just grabbing cups of coffee with their coworkers. And so I definitely think, you know, these things that we're all talking about now are kind of warp speed, right? Like we're kind of there. There's no more, it might happen. Scenario.
Yeah, and the technology is there too. I think it's a given now. I mean, you're connected everywhere, right? I mean, connectivity was a must before even all this. So it's not like, hey, if I'm downstairs, I'm suddenly disconnected from my office. So yeah, we've realized that part of this is always about getting the consumer to adopt what we're selling or trying to push. And you know, this pandemic has really forced that in so many ways for all of us to get way more comfortable with technology. Look what we're doing here today. And we see it from our residential standpoint, where we have the ability and we're trying to push for virtual tours, you know, leasing apartments. And it just was impossible. People were just uncomfortable with that and didn't understand that. What do you mean? I got to I got to go see it and walk in and see the view. And within days of this, we were doing virtual tours, and so was the consumer. So, you know, we've needed them to adopt a lot of what we were selling, if you will. And it's happening, and I think it'll continue to grow.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of some of the conversations we were having some years ago about, there was that whole moment when you could access anywhere, anytime e-commerce. Why go to the store? And so there was this big discussion at that point, that moment in time, about, oh, well, you go to the store for a social experience, to touch, to see other people. And now we're talking about that, about the workplace. It's really, you know, it's like, what do you go to the office for? Well, you go to have an impromptu meeting. You go to have, you know, 4 people sitting 6 feet apart in a circle, because, wow, it's really, it's a qualitatively different than doing it on a Microsoft Teams call or a Zoom call. But I think that we are going to now be asked to now, you know, prototype and configure, answer this question of what is the value of face-to-face interaction. We know it's there, it's never going away. But certain things that were given, like before in the store, like you needed to go to store to get the product, that was out the window. You know, you can get a lot of your work done from anywhere, but you need to go to the office for what? You know, many reasons, but that's what we're going to be answering now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's a great point. You know, if you can work from anywhere, what does your building or workplace offer? Why are you going in there?
Yeah.
You know, Carrie and I were in the office together yesterday, and, you know, we started this office 4 years ago, and, you know, we were used to spending 50 hours a week together. And, you know, now we spend an hour a month together, and it's hard. It's, we realized how hard it was just seeing each other, you know, and kind of going over our struggles as of late. You know, I'm happier around my coworkers. That's just a fact. Cultural connection, you know, random social interaction doesn't happen over Zoom. Mentoring doesn't happen over Zoom. Hearing your colleague talk on the phone to a client or a consultant and asking them questions about what they were talking about doesn't happen. So it's hard to grow as a company and a culture and mentor staff without being together.
Right, right. I think that's really key here, you know, is what is the essential part of the workplace experience. And certainly if anybody thinks through that retail analogy, you know, we know that retail stores are closing, some retail stores are closing down at the moment, but some are likely to come back stronger than ever. And the question is, you know, what is the difference? I think that's a really interesting line of thought, Gideon. We have a comment here from Thomas Papadinoff. He says, let's not forget landscape architects as experts in designing site and outdoor spaces. A quality project includes many disciplines. Thomas, we couldn't agree more. Doug Whitneville has a question here. He says, is there any way, and I think Gideon, this might be a direct question to you, is there any way we could create a set of standards or requirements that could be used as part of a billboard or a digital lighthouse at the building lobby and entry points, and make this a part of building occupancy and usage code, national or international standards? Gideon mentioned this in narrative. You know, I mean, obviously this is an idea we saw a few buildings adopt actually in the early days of LEED, right? Building performance dashboards in lobbies and so on. Is that an idea that's coming back? Is that a useful idea? I think it connects to your question of, you know, what do we communicate with occupants? We can't just give them everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ArcScore does a good job of standardizing LEED building, you know, performance dashboards, and I think that shows the way forward for wellness data. And I think absolutely that there's some kind of readout. You know, a dashboard is one form of design, but it could be so many different things. But that there's some interface where the building information comes out to you is I think critical, and will become more. There's so much data in the building but right now this story about health and wellness data is being pushed to the fore. I think, you know, with ArcScore and LEED performance, the idea of kind of doing periodic monitoring of compliance on, let's say, LEED or WELL is one thing, but doing constant monitoring and constant feedback is more interesting, and it requires a lot more. And so ultimately you could imagine a future where constant feedback or constant readout of the building performance from a variety of perspectives becomes the norm, rather than the periodic, you do it just when the building's commissioned, or you do it once a year. And so I think it could go from being a nicety to a must-have at some point. But I think now we're still in a design moment where I think you're going to see all kinds of different designs of dashboards. I think, so I don't think we'll see a standard right quick, but I think we should move towards one. And, there's some really good standards that are gaining traction right now that we mentioned earlier with Well and Fitwell that we could look to. And even within the Well standard, you can get points for communication and real-time monitoring. Now, it's kind of an obscure corner of it, but that can be done.
Right. So it can actually be to a building's advantage to kind of continually monitor and report. We have a series of questions here, all to do with different types of amenities. I just want to remind everyone, if you go into the Q&A button to give us a question and you see that somebody's asked a similar question, I encourage you to go ahead and use the upvote button at this point, so that we can get to some of the topics, at least, that all of you are interested in first. We have a series of questions here to do with different kinds of amenity spaces. I'd love to take them in succession here. The first question that we have, Brian Weinhold has asked it, and Christine Vandover has asked, so food spaces, food halls, food courts, cafes. Tell us about how our expectations are going to shift in those areas. Steve, maybe you want to comment on that, and then maybe Carrie, you want to jump in as well.
Yeah, good question. And obviously food had become a really important part of our buildings, and a central piece of so many redesigns ourselves, others as well, between food halls, coffee shops, bringing in food or bringing in local restaurants to serve lunch. And obviously that's been severely impacted. Off the top of my head, I think the big one is still providing that space, but having in-unit or in-building delivery. We were trying to push that before, but it just kind of was hard to adopt. People would rather go down, grab their cup of coffee, sit in the cafe. And I think now, kind of Carrie's example earlier about the print shop, hey, we'll come if you don't want to come to us, we'll come to you. I think services that can come to the building, bring it to you in your space, will be important. Again, I think it's a great social aspect. It's what brings us together, drives collaboration, and just fun too, right? I mean, sometimes you just gotta not talk about work for an hour and go to lunch and talk fantasy football or TV, what Netflix shows you're watching. So I don't know. I know it's going to come back. We'd love to see it, but I think it will take. That's a threshold we've got to start to cross.
Yeah, I think to the point earlier about we are social and people are still going out. People are still going to restaurants. That's still happening in a different way. We're all outside right now while we can be, thank goodness, in Chicago. So I think it'll be interesting to see that shift in the winter for us in particular here. But I also kind of see it tying into what Gideon was talking about. And I don't know, I kind of imagine this future where on my phone, I can see how many people might be in the food hall at the moment. You have your cart badge that you swipe into the building with, that's gonna count you. You have your badge that you might swipe into the coffee shop in the building. So, you're getting counted. And we talked about this when we were doing a little pre-discussion about, Gideon brought up this good point about how we all have to be stewards of the building, and the communication between each other and us as a community, and being willing to share our information, I think is going to be even more important. I'm not saying like your social security number when you walk through the door, but at least being able to, find your dot in that coffee shop. So, you can make these, I think, informed decisions on if you're comfortable crossing that threshold or not. And I know that the technology is out there. We've talked to different furniture manufacturers that have little sensors that, you put under your desk, and they can track how many people are in the conference room and how the usage is. And do you need a large conference room versus, 4-person conference room? And, that metric is already there and being tracked. I kind of see the air quality being tied into it and the occupancy count being tied into it, and this sort of, you know, cool graphic that just pops up on your phone when you get close to a space.
You know, but I think what's, you know, if we're looking for the upside in all of this, maybe, you know, in shared common areas, you know, there's going to be a greater awareness of each other that comes out of this, which would be really great. You know, I mean, if the flip side is, you know, you're staying away from that person, but you know, I think if we imagine, you know, what's the etiquette, what are the behavioral norms that we're looking for in the new shared spaces, and how do I need to be informed, whether it be by technology or just using my eyes or great signage or whatever it is, cues of all kinds. The upside would be great, you know, if that we were able to create these really civil environments where, you know, I see you, you see me, you know, we decide to form a group, and I'm going to let those folks be over there, and there's just a degree more consciousness about that we're sharing a space.
Right, right. You know, at the very start of, you know, the rising caseloads in the US, Dr. Kessler, who used to be the head of the FDA, wrote an amazing op-ed in the New York Times, and he said, you know, we each hold our neighbor's health in our hands. And I think that sense of like shared responsibility is something that we should reinforce, and, you know, might lead us to different behaviors, as you're saying. So thank you so much for that. We're going to start taking questions at a fairly rapid clip now. We have a few interesting questions on the docket, and we want to get to as many of them as possible. Just to remind everyone, we're here talking about evolving communal spaces with Carrie Vagadis from Huntsman Architectural Group, Andrew Volkins from Huntsman as well, Steve Slice from Golub & Company, and Gideon Darkangelo from Arup. Andrew, I'd like to come to you with this next question. You know, we've just been talking about food spaces, and food spaces were considered to be, you know, pretty much the #1 amenity in most, you know, office projects. And one of the big reasons was, you know, there was a direct link to, you know, talent retention and to to engagement, especially for younger generations in the office. So we have a very interesting question. What is the new amenity that we will need to provide for those, you know, younger groups who, as Steve said, live in that studio apartment that feels 50% smaller now, or, you know, have challenges that maybe older employees may not, you know, and so, is there an amenity that, you know, we should be thinking about in the new normal, or is it still food?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right?
I'm glad you asked the intro.
Yes.
You know, I think no matter what, it's going to be centered around wellness. You know, we've talked about that today, but that's really what it's going to be about. It's going to be a place where people feel healthy. They have access to light, views, the use of, you know, natural materials. But I also think it's going to be a space that offers a lot of different flexibility. You know, I think of tenant lounges, for instance. You can do a lot of different things. There's private events, there's team building possibilities. You can open up to the public. There's gaming areas, right? There's outdoor areas. So I think things that offer a variety of different uses are going to come to the forefront. You know, it's not going to be just plop a golf simulator in kind of thing. And so I see it being, you know, a space that's flexible, a space that's open to the exterior, a space that's, you know, really designed with a wellness perspective at hand.
Actually, that's fantastic, because until we're all still discovering what we need in this, you know, in this time of crisis. So a space that might solve many different needs seems like a spot-on response to that question. Caddy Guyton, and this is jump to the top of our questions. I had my eye on it as people were looking at it too. Childcare is not an amenity typically built into workplaces, but what we've learned, you know, with COVID, with kids, you know, learning at home and so on, do you see that becoming an aspect of buildings that, you know, we might have to start paying attention to? I see Carrie nodding, so I'm going to go to Carrie first. But Steve, if you have a comment on that, feel free to come in.
I'm nodding because, as I said earlier, I'm in the office to get away from the children at the moment, but as much as I love them. But I do think that as a mom and a working mom, and I've been a stay-at-home mom, that childcare is hugely missed opportunity, and something that I think is a really I'm glad whoever brought that up. I really appreciate that question, because I think, you know, there's discussions that are starting a little bit more at a local level. And obviously, you know, we're hearing it more at a federal level, just about childcare and the support around childcare. And, you know, now with schools sort of taking on so much more, you know, they're more than just a school. They're social workers, there's, you know, they're food providers, they literally are shelters, you know, the teachers are parents, you know. So I definitely think that, you know, back to the community part, that we definitely need to do better about taking care of each other and taking care of each other's families.
Right. Absolutely. Steve, I'd like to come to you with a two-part question. We have a question from Caddy Guyton who says, how do we improve or rethink our HVAC systems? Are there any answers beyond outside air and MERV filters? And then linked to that, you know, we were talking about permeability between indoor and outdoor spaces. Antonio Rubello says, but that can wreak havoc with mechanical systems in some parts of the country. And I know you've likely addressed that with the 300 project, which is the commercial building that we're all talking about, 300 Backer in Chicago, you know, that Golub and Company, Arab, and Huntsman Architectural Group all worked on. It was an amazing, you know, update of a building in Chicago with a whole bunch of amenity spaces. So tell us a little bit about that. First, you know, are you looking at HVAC systems? And second, you know, as we're talking about indoor outdoor spaces, you know, how do you address that? Are there some simple ways to address that? You know, in a situation where, as in the 300, there's an ANA wall that, you know, opens up between indoor and outdoor.
Sure, I will gladly take the first half. I may not be the best on the second part of it when we get into the specific engineering, but in terms of HVAC system, absolutely, because everyone said, oh, you know, put in HEPA filters. Well, it's not that easy. You got to make sure your systems can handle that. You know, if you don't have the system that can properly handle that dense of a filter, you've got other issues that are going to come about. So we've looked at, so again, that was one thing we audited. What kind of filters do we have? What are our systems able to withstand? From my research, what we've seen, MERV 13 is, you know, as good as you can get, is what you need. That's as fine of a filter for virus sizes. So we've audited that, and I think where we haven't been able to go to MERV 13, in most instances we have, you know, we are exploring UV lights, exploring bipolar ionization, which I think still can tie in with the MERV. So again, I'm not an engineer. This is what I'm hearing from others. So someone may be able to correct me more, but yes, we're very focused on that. And it's a good point. You've got to think about what can your system handle, and we're being cautious there.
Andrew, do you want to pick up on, you know, how do you handle indoor outdoor permeability with regard to, you know, building systems? And then I think my next question is going to come to you as well.
Sure. I mean, I'm not an engineer either, but I know that, you know, doing 100% of fresh air in July in Chicago doesn't make a lot of sense from a sustainability aspect. And so there's got to be a balance between, you know, providing the healthy amount of air changes with the environment you're in. And so again, there's not really a one size fits all solution. You have to assess your building, you have to assess your environment, and what it's capable of, and go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think tying back to the 300, one comment on that, you know, thankfully we had a great team on that project, because we all identified early on, like, you can't just open up this huge glass wall and think everything's going to be fine from air pressure and systems. So I would say make sure you hire good architects and engineers to help you answer those questions.
ESD actually worked with us on that, and I know that there were a lot of issues around it, because, you know, the lights swinging or whatever it is, even from, you know, the design standpoint, the revolving doors and the pressure at the beginning of the building, you know, we had to keep sort of trial and error a little bit on that. There was definitely some back and forth, and, you know, some added wind screens in places, and it was a good challenge.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, I think maybe this might be a question for you. Do you see these types of questions applying for community spaces or commons in other building types, like K through 12 or other, you know, institutional spaces?
Oh, certainly.
Are we going to see likely the same challenges? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we're talking about commercial office buildings today, but I think this is applicable to all different types of buildings. You know, I think of schools and, you know, my daughter's school, and, you know, they're trying to do as much of their education outdoors as possible, right? They've got a little courtyard and they're holding classes there. You know, everyone's access, you know, maximizing the amount of outdoor space they have and utilizing it to their full potential. So like Steve mentioned, residential balconies are coming back. You know, outdoor shared spaces are a huge draw for tenants, renters, and the like.
Right. And I think, you know, if I'm not mistaken, there's also been some research, you know, prior to COVID-19, which maybe we have to pick up, that talks about, you know, whether we can start looking at outdoor space as part of, you know, FAR calculations and so on, considering it's usable space, you know, rather than recreational space. And then how do we, you know, monitor that and audit that and so on. So, but I think there's so much happening, not just in the workplace sector, but, you know, across the board, as you said, Andrew. Thank you so much for that. Kitty, you and us, and this sounds like a natural question for Steve. What changes are you seeing in lease agreements and renewals that, and have COVID-19 impacted that? And does that affect the spaces being designed, affect common areas? So, you know. Yeah.
Well, yeah, biggest thing is we all know a lot more about force majeure than we did 7 months ago. My saying back then was always like, hey, if we got to talk about force majeure, we got bigger issues to talk about. So, and sure enough, that's what happened. So, and that's not in every lease, and people don't understand it, and it all depends. There's a lot of nuance to it, but I think that's the biggest one. And just for the, you know, that's, if there's an act of God, do you owe me rent or not? You know, whether you are occupying your space or not. So, you know, it's going to be a challenge because it's going to be two very different standpoints or viewpoints on that issue and on this issue going forward. And the landlord's going to say, you owe me rent. And the tenant's going to want to say, no, I don't. So, you know, unfortunately, leasing been a little quiet. I can't speak to any kind of specific examples, but knowing that's coming, and I can tell you we're reviewing a lot of aspects of our lease documents right now, from, you know, indemnification liability as well relating to these matters, and PPP funds too, or government programs. And if you receive those funds, you know, do you owe us rent? So you know, it's going to be interesting. Lawyers are going to probably make a lot of money here coming up in the next few months as we find our way through that. How does the lease, in terms of the space, not seeing that tied in. My suspicion is people are just going to want more flexibility, reduce space, you know, downsize, upsize, relocate, whatever the, you know, I think more language there. I think it'll be interesting too. I mean, we're lease term, you know, office world, 5, 7, 10 years is what we prefer. Tenants wanted 3. I think that you'll start seeing even shorter terms because people are just going to say, I don't know, how do I plan for 2 years out from now, 12 months out from now? You know, we've been doing spec suites for a number of years, working with Huntsman closely on a lot of spec suites, and we'll continue to do that because I think that's just going to become even more important. People are going to make short-term decisions, want space quickly. I don't know what 9 months from now looks like, but today I need space for 6 people, 10 people, 12 people. Or more, and what do you have available? And I want to be able to get out of it in you know, 2 years, 3 years. So I think length of term will probably be another area that's impacted here.
That's so interesting, that idea of, you know, spec suites maybe becoming more of a thing, you know, going forward. You know, it sounds like an alarming thing, but actually, you know, from an interior design perspective, you know, it actually gives building owners more control of certain spaces, you know, and that could be a force for good, you know, in terms of keeping people healthy and safe and you know, well connected to each other, you know, which might not be, which, you know, a company coming in for a 3-year lease might want to sacrifice some of those things given the budget that they're probably working with on a 3-year lease. So it's really interesting. I mean, I could definitely see some advantages to that actually from a design point of view.
I think so too. I mean, the concept's more efficient for everybody, you know, landlord and the tenant too. So like, here's space, fine, maybe, you know, it's not 100% what you need, but it's 95 and you can be in it tomorrow. And, you know, so it was a good trend before this, and I think it'll be even more positive.
Well, I think it gives the tenant this is a new space. This is a space that's been designed, with at least COVID in the know, right? And it's plug and play, it's fresh, it's new, it's yours, hasn't been touched. There's a perception there for future tenants that I think is really attractive.
Yeah, the spec suites that we've been designing recently have been really flexible, sort of, harking back onto what Andrew said earlier. We show sort of max density, but the plan allows itself to sort of shift and move, and desks can slide around depending on, the comfort of, the tenant looking at the space. We've thought about different things, adding hand wash stations closer to the front, instead of using the kitchen sink where your food, might go. So I think the spec suite world is an interesting one, and especially like Andrew said, to have something new and sort of thoughtful around the current environment that we're in, I think will be appealing.
Right. Carrie, maybe this next question is one that you can pick up for us. Carrie Geithner again asks, how do you think COVID will change shared amenities in co-working spaces? So flex spaces, which rely a lot on shared spaces, even more so than regular office buildings. Is that going to change?
I think, from my experience within shared spaces, such as co-working, WeWorks, whatever it may be, the technology is really key for those spaces. You use your phone to check out the conference rooms. You use your phone, to schedule a private event. Everything is sort of right there at your fingertips. And again, I think it's an easy snapshot way to see how you're sharing the space with the 50 other companies that are in there. If you're lucky enough to have an office space within one of those shared spaces, obviously you can sort of mold it to however fits you the best. But it sort of just goes back to that community aspect again. Really being thoughtful about your neighbors and how you're interacting and how you're finding the space and how you're leaving the space. And I think the signage and the cues and the healthy cues are going to be really important. Gideon and I kind of were talking about, the produce section of the supermarket, and, walking in and seeing the fresh produce kind of alerts you to this space is good. You're going to get fresh food here. And I think we need to start having those cues in our offices and our buildings too, that really alert the tenants and the people coming into the building that this is good space. You're going to be safe here.
Right. We have just a few more questions here. Maybe this one quickly for Steve. A.G. Peters asks, how will HVAC or quality upgrades be paid for? Will this affect rent? It seems to be a large financial responsibility to fall solely on the landlord's shoulders.
Oh, the HVAC upgrades to be paid for?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think depending on the specific project, either through a capital budget or operating expense, depending.
Right. Deb Tanis has an interesting question, and I don't know if any of you would like to pick up on this. Any ideas or recommendations for addressing outdoor spaces and daylight substitutions for environments with 19 plus hours or even months of darkness in freezing temperatures? So clearly we're talking, up north. Physically hard, not to mention energy issues or HVAC factors. So, we're talking Chicago, but Chicago is not, way up north Canada. So, what do we do in places that are challenged with, sunlight or not great weather for, large amounts of time?
Gosh, that's a good one. I haven't had experience designing in these spaces up there. I don't know, Gideon, if Arab has any sort of feedback on any of that or projects.
We may have. I don't have experience working in those great, so far northern latitudes either. But one would think that you're going to try to create as much, take as much advantage of the daylight as you possibly can, and you're going to be relying on artificial light or, perhaps sustainably generated light as part of your design. Be a really great design assignment to get.
Yeah, and the circadian rhythms that I know that can be programmed, the lighting, I think are really key. Even and spaces in Chicago where, you know, it's dark and dreary a lot of the winter. So we see that even in projects here. So I think, you know, sort of incorporating as much sort of natural into our lives is really important.
Right, right, absolutely. We have a question here from Daryl Dean, but I think it might inspire our last sort of question, you know, for this panel. And I might be making this tougher than needed, so, you know, please bear with me. Daryl Dean asks, are you seeing any changes to the sizes of typical workstations or work areas? So if any of you want to directly respond to that, that's totally fine. But I'm interested, I think, as our closing comments here, you know, how do we decide how much is enough? You know, how do we right size our approaches to the current situation? How do we make sure we don't do too much and end up making places more restrictive than they need to be? Gideon, for instance, to your point at the start of this conversation, you know, that we don't overwhelm people with information. So if anybody wants to pick up on Daryl's immediate question about typical workspaces and work areas, that would be great. And then I'd love to hear more largely about, you know, how do we keep a measure? How do we make our approach evidence-based, step-by-step, kind of, you know, progressive, so that we don't err on the side of doing too much?
I can jump in on the workstation just because I'm sort of in the middle of it right now. We have seen a shift from the dense benching systems that were requested before. You know, real estate dollars are important. You know, let's see how many people that we can get into a space. You know, we were seeing, you know, tech companies get down into the, you know, 120 per square foot or something a person. And so we're definitely seeing a shift back to a more 6x6-ish workstation size. At least we're planning for that. I think the other thing that I'm starting to see more of, and I was seeing it even prior, but the idea of this sort of fence or hitching post idea. So your spine of your workstation really carries all the power and data, and you literally can just pull your desk up anywhere you might want along that spine and configure it in any direction that's comfortable to you. And I think that's a really ingenious way right now to sort of solve people, like let people make the choice on how they want to work and how they feel comfortable working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, we've been seeing the trend for a while of, and not just in office spaces, but in other environments, of smaller individual spaces and greater common areas. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just been a shift. And it's been interesting for me as an experience designer, because often where we work is in common areas. You know, we work in shared spaces, and how can we enhance that experience in those spaces? So, you know, I think that, to your point about how, you know, that we don't swing the pendulum too far the other way right now, I think is a good point. I would just simply agree that that we want to take a measured approach to these changes, because we're really just, you know, you can't solve a problem the moment it happens upon you. You know, you have to kind of experience for a while and really see how it unfolds. But we are seeing, I mean, what I think is interesting is a lot of the trends we were seeing before now have just been simply accelerated, not new. And so many of the use cases that we were postulating about, you know, digital and physical integration, you know, 5 years ago, when we said, well, it's too much of a stretch, no one's going to do that, you know, we've readily adopt quickly, because now, you know, the technology integration into the built environment, so that you can kind of learn how the building is thinking, feeling, and making decisions, is something that's been going on for a while. And I think we're just going to see that accelerated now, because there's going to be a greater need for a building to have, you know, an operating system, if you will, that sort of updates year on year and not be this rigid, fixed thing. So, you know, I think we're just going to, you know, so even if we accelerate that and learn that certain use cases are overshooting the mark, the fact that we have a smart building will be useful, and it will be able to adapt to whatever's next.
Steve, you started this conversation talking about, you know, taking a step-by-step approach. You know, just any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we're trying not to overreact, right? It's early on. We're all, you know, hopefully it's getting better, right? Hopefully the best is ahead of us here, or better times are ahead of us here. So we're being cautious in there, but I think you have to look at like what sticks. Indoor air quality is a good thing, whether there's a pandemic or not. So that's important. Let's learn more. Let's advance there. Technology is coming into our lives more and more. Some sticks, some doesn't. The consumer dictates a lot of that, but you know, we continue to vet and review and explore technology, and you know, we should be more and more open to it. I think there's a lot of importance, good theme here about just the visual cues that give comfort. Just personal experience. You walk into a place and they got the stickers on the ground and they got signs for masks and they got a nice hand sanitizer station. Just, you feel more confident walking in there. And I think an important thing is, hey, you know, this space was cleaned 90 minutes ago, 60 minutes ago. Indoor air quality is green today. Those are going to be really important factors. And that's simple. And then let's see, in terms of space, yeah, I'm hearing anywhere from 20% to 50% more per person. 50% seems pretty extreme. But I think the other thing, and again, we saw this kind of evolving a little bit beforehand, less of these corporate boardrooms, you know, traditional large boardrooms, and seeing more flexible, small group workspaces. I think that's going to even continue more. A lot of it because we built the boardrooms, conference rooms in our building as many space, but you know, now it's going to be the Zoom video conference room, you know, is what we're going to be setting up. So I think you're just going to see it used a little differently here.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm going to give you the last word here. You know, you started out talking to us about, you know, how important the feel of a space is and keeping that human experience front of mind. And Steve just brought us back to that idea. So, you know, in terms of that, any last thoughts on sort of, you know, right-sized, measured approaches to this current situation?
Yeah, I echo the sentiments that Steve just said. You know, I think these knee-jerk reactions we're seeing from some of these large tech companies that saying they're going to keep their employees home for a year, you know, for the next year or so, whatever it may be. I think I don't see how that works. I think at the end of the day, no matter what this new world looks like, place is still going to matter. So your workplace is still going to matter. Your shared spaces are still going to matter. You know, working out of a bedroom for the last 6 months, this space is getting to me, the place is getting to me, right? So our mission collectively, you know, with our team and our clients and our consultants should not just be about making spaces beautiful, but now it's got to be about making them healthy and meaningful as well.
Right, absolutely. Well, this has been an absolutely incredible discussion. Thank you all so much for your insights. We've touched upon so many things here. I think some really key aspects of this are, you know, really keeping the human experience front and center, you know, understanding that people still need to connect to each other. And so having confidence in the fact that, you know, the workplace is still going to be of value to people, and then asking, as Gideon reminded us at some point, you know, what are those aspects that are going to be valuable to people, both among members of design teams, as well as, you know, with our and with our clients and with our end users, you know, and also in that sense, using digital technology to track the efficacy of what we're doing, but also to track people's reactions to what we're doing, and then to communicate those things. Steve, I didn't miss that you said indoor air quality is green. You know, obviously you're thinking of some kind of indicator, you know, of how a space functions and performs, and that's obviously data driven. So, you know, just understanding that, you know, we need to use technology to be able to communicate with each other, and then to really think about many different types of amenities and solutions that maybe we haven't thought about before. I think that's really interesting as well. Andrew, you spoke about flexible spaces, and Steve came back to that idea with his, you know, with his reaction to boardrooms, right? So, you know, ultimately, you know, while we're in this space of, you know, we don't know, keeping ourselves open and keeping spaces flexible is going to be a key strategy, I think. So thank you all so much for contributing to today's discussion. Thank you also to our attendees for asking the questions that they did. You've provided some fantastic prompts for today's conversation. Thanks as well to our sponsors for today's discussion: Hunter Douglas Sealing and Wall Products, Growy, KI, Material Bank, and Versteel for making this discussion possible. We really appreciate your support. And of course, last but not least, thank you to Huntsman Architectural Group for co-hosting today's discussion, for pulling this topic together and putting forward, I think, some really interesting prompts that are top of mind for most of us in the professions today. Thank you again. Again, a reminder, today's discussion has been recorded. It will be available on our website, as well as on our homepage, as well as our Facebook page this coming Tuesday. So if you want to listen to a rerun of this conversation, you can then. And then following that, it will be available on our website at metropolismag.com/thinktank on demand. So you can return to it whenever you'd like to. Write-ups, reports on today's discussion will also be available on our website in a couple of weeks, as well as in an upcoming issue of Metropolis. So look out for that. We'll try and distill some of the insights here in those reports as well. Thanks, everyone. Thank you to our audience, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.